Today's episode is with an inspiring man who has an amazing accent. He's a champion of the regenerative farming movement and an all-around wealth of information. I guarantee you're going to learn something in today's show because I know I did. Today's episode is with Martin Crompton. You look fabulous.
You don't mind me injecting a bit of my peculiar, quirky English humor all the way through?
Please do. Please. We're doing Star Wars ties. We're doing regenerative farming today. It's a new ride.
I'm going to have to get a Star Wars.
Yeah. So yesterday was the first time I ever wore a suit on the podcast because the guy we
look
did,
at you.
He's known
was
for...
this for my benefit? He's a boomer. Better put a suit and a tie on.
Well, I was talking to John about it. I was like, yo, when we first spoke, I was like, he's got this awesome analogy of Star Wars and regenerative farming. So yesterday, John walks in. He's like, dude, I've got a Star Wars tie. Wow. And I was like, I'm wearing it tomorrow. Martin's coming in. Bring the tie. So I never wear suits. I've literally been like, I was almost anti-suit in a way. But yesterday and today, the two times I've worn a suit in the last 30 days.
I came up through corporate.
Yeah.
And worked for a lot of corporate American companies, but in the UK. And that was all what we used to call suited and booted.
Suited and booted.
So it was always the suit and the tie, and you had to look part, particularly when you got up to like C-suite levels. Yeah. But then one day I was just looking in the mirror and I looked across and I just saw this little strip of material and I was like, what is that all about? What's with the tie? And then I took it off and I was like, that looks quite cool without a tie on. And that was it. And I remember going in that day and my CEO came across. Yeah. And I had a good relation. I think it was VP. I was in the C-suite then. And he was like, what's with the tie? And I was like, so I told him that. So I was looking at this morning and I was like, isn't it weird? Just this little piece of thin material.
What does this do?
And he looked down at his and he was like, I've never thought of it before.
Quite right, yeah.
And I've never wore a tie since. Yeah. You got to wear a suit for the corporate.
Well, you've been all around, right? Like when we spoke, you said you've been around
the world and Yeah. So it was went to college, got my degree. Yeah. The sausage factory.
For sure.
I went to a very good school, which allowed me to go to a good university and then got a business studies. I always attracted into business. Yeah. Anything that allowed me to chat and get paid for it, basically, and interact with people.
For sure.
So it led me into business. And then I got onto what I call the greasy pole of corporate business life, because that was what you were told was where the big bucks were. Yeah. And then just worked my way up to the higher echelons.
Kind of where people had been pointing you through all those different experiences.
Yeah. So I got up to the higher echelons. And then after what must have been, 20 years? No, not 20 years, about 15 years of doing that. Yeah. It was the higher up you go, the more toys you get, the more money you get, and then it kind of hooks you in, and it becomes like golden handcuffs. Yeah. And I just wasn't happy. I just didn't feel at peace internally. And just something was, I call it a resonance. When you and I talked on the phone, the reason why I came down today, the reason why I followed up, is because there's a resonance inside. And whenever I meet, whoever they are, I don't care. If it's someone I meet on a bus stop or in a coffee shop or it's in business, within seconds, usually within 30 seconds, I can pick up if there's a resonance. I'll get on with anybody. I've been blessed with a little bit of intelligence, but I was blessed with my ability to connect in with people.
For sure, yeah.
And I'm fascinated by psychology, psychology of others and my own psychology as to what makes us tick. And that's very useful in business because it's all about relationship. Even in this day and age of social media and now we're getting AI coming in behind it, which is going to be fun and games. But I've always found that nothing can beat this, what I call belly to belly.
Oh, yeah.
Eyeball to eyeball.
Yeah.
Because you get a feel for a person. That's not woo-woo, that's reality. We're energy. Everything in the universe is energy. So if you tap into that, you can connect in with someone very quickly.
Yeah.
And what I've found as well is if I'm completely open with people, that opens them up. When you're closed, creates an energy that closes them off. Whereas I just go, this is who I am. Now, if I feel that there's someone's going to come in and attack at that point, I can maneuver.
Do a little dodging on it, yeah.
I don't remember, I think one time in my entire life that's happened. Outside of that, it's led me to make some really cool connections.
Yeah. When did you like start, I guess, becoming really in tune with how you were interacting with the world? I mean, I feel like a lot of people, like when we met and we were first speaking about, you got to do your Myers-Briggs. No one's ever asked me. Haven't been in the world that long, but like no one's ever asked me that before. Like, when did you become really intentional about that?
It's a natural interest in people, and as I say, that led to a natural interest in psychology. Because oftentimes it's not when you meet people. It's like, what the hell? Why did they think that way? Why do they operate that way? Why do they do certain things?
For sure.
And then what I've done in probably the last decade, a lot of work on myself and what I call spinning the mirror around.
Oh, yeah.
It's the ability to see yourself as you are, not as you think you are, or as you would like to be seen, or what you project to be. And there's a lot of defensiveness around that. And so what I value in my friends and those closest to me, more than anything, is for them to have the courage to hold a mirror up to me. And it takes courage to do
be
it
honest
with
with you,
to be balls honest with somebody.
Tough, yeah.
Because we like to hear how wonderful, like Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
So I'll touch on that. That tells you all your wonderful advantages and your strengths. Each one of us. So I'm not unlike anybody else in the world. And when you come into the world, you get a deck of cards. Some of them are good cards and some of them are challenge cards. I don't use the words, as I said to you before, problems and issues. People talk in negative language all the time. And it's another thing I'm really strong on. If you talk negative, if you've got negative thoughts and you express them as words, you're giving them more power.
The language you're using.
If you then put that into typed words or written words, you're expressing it at another level. So I'm more and more consciously aware of my thoughts that you're going to have them from time to time, but I'll let them float by like a cloud. I look to not attach to them these days.
More observe them and let them be.
Yeah. So for me, it's challenges. So someone comes up, we got a problem here, or there's an issue there. And I'm like, right, okay, we've got a challenge. There's a solution to every challenge. I don't care what it is. Every major challenge that's ever happened in the universe, there's a solution to it. If you bring your creative mind to it and you're open to finding those solutions. And that's what's led me into what my role currently is and has been for the last 10 years, which I call myself a solution provider.
Yeah, exactly. You hit on that when we first spoke. What do you feel like puts you in a position, and I think you use the analogy too of being a conductor, because you've been in a lot of different sort of roles and positions. I mean, from corporate now to farming, et cetera.
Yeah.
What tools do you use to put you in a position where you can become a good conductor of so many different types of people, things, companies, systems,
Okay, so primarily what I see as my strength. So, and if you don't mind, I'll cover because you asked me about it, and I want to make sure that I'm answering these questions straight. Myers-Briggs.
Yep.
So what led me into that was, again, it was a corporate exercise. I was in the C-suite. The CEO wanted to take his senior guys away and basically get a team building exercise.
For sure.
And within the midst of that, he brought a consultant in who said, right, we're going to do this psychometric test. And as I've said to you before, I've done a lot of psychometric tests, and you pretty much know whoever you're talking with, whatever the entity is, what they're looking for from that. So you answer them accordingly. But this guy, there was something, again, resonated inside about him. I felt integrity from him, and he basically said, this is for you. The CEO is going to benefit from it because he's going to have an understanding of his team dynamic.
But it's not an interview or for the next thing.
This is for your benefit. This is an opportunity. This is what really opened my mind to holding a mirror. What that does. What Myers-Briggs does is it holds a mirror up to who you are.
Yeah.
And what it shows you is your strengths, but it also, and this is a word I picked up on at that time as well, constraints. I never say a weakness.
Ooh, okay.
Right?
Yep.
It's a constraint. What are the things that drive your life forward, the positive things, your attributes? The constraints are the things that hold you back.
Yep.
They're the things that stop you from becoming your full self. And a lot of time, we're blindsided to them. We don't see them because we don't want to. We've all got a strong ego mind to one degree or another. And that blindsides us to what our constraints are. So we love hearing all our positive attributes, but we don't necessarily want to hear something that we feel is critical or putting us down. And that's why it's very, very important how you express that to another person. And the best way I feel that you can express it is to do what I say, hold the mirror up. It's not an actual mirror. It's a psychological, it's an emotional mirror. It's a personality mirror. And let that person see them through your eyes. So you're not judging or criticizing. You're just saying, this is what I'm hearing you say. This is what I'm seeing you do. And this is how it makes me feel or respond
Radical
to that.
transparency. Yeah.
You've still got the choice whether you want to accept that or
For
not.
sure, yeah.
A lot of people want to break the mirror or run away from the mirror or say the mirror is faulty. But at the end of the day,
you got a bad mirror right there. I don't know. Like,
exactly.
Go get another.
And Myers-Briggs is the best psychometric test I've ever come across, and I've done them all, DISC and enneagrams and all the rest of it, for actually showing you where you are. And I love and I like analogies, as I've told you before, of what Isabella Briggs, who formulated that test. She's the Briggs of the Myers-Briggs. And she basically says we come into this world with basically your strengths are like an eagle's wing and your constraints are like a budgie's wing or a sparrow's wing. So what you'll find in life, if you're not aware of those constraints and look to build those up and balance yourself off holistically, if you've got an eagle's wing and a sparrow's wing, you tend to just fly in circles. You're not going to soar.
Oh, that's good.
And you're going to go around in circles. So as far what that led me to with the fascination for people was from a business perspective, I went into sales initially, then business development, then marketing. Opportunities to interact with people, but also make money from doing it. And the corporate environment is all about profits and share price and driving things forward.
Exactly. The return.
But we kind of lost our way a little bit culturally by driving that at all costs. The 80s in particular, a lot of the films around that time, greed is good, is that we lost sight of there's a way to make a profit, but you don't have to rape and pillage. You don't have to take advantage. You
can do endless growth need, always improving, getting better, bigger,
at all costs.
At all costs,
And that's what's led us to where we are now, where we've got all these crises in the world, whether it's health or the environment or the climate. Or mental health issues, physical health issues. And there seems to be this sort of growing storm that's culminating together.
So what was the true cost of that mindset?
Exactly. However, on a positive note, there's an awakening taking place. There's doubts about whether it's at the scale we need it to awaken. We've just had COP28, which is all the high and mighty movers and groovers, government, corporates, etc., organizations, the UN have met in Dubai. They meet every year to basically review the state of the world and all the issues at the moment that they are calling issues. I call them major challenges, revolve around what I've just said, the climate challenge, the environmental challenge. And now we've got things like technology coming to the fore. So we're having to deal with issues in the current generation, so millennials, not the grey hairs like me, the boomers. We're all going into retirement soon. We need you to work hard and earn a lot of money to pay your taxes to pay for our retirement. Very much
we'll jump right on it.
Someone's got to look after me.
That's right.
So that's all about. Basically, there's a lot of talk around these major challenges that we face as humanity, and there's not always a lot of action.
It can kind of feel overwhelming in a way if you think about it on this massive scale. It almost is just like paralyzing in a way of like, well, what can I do? What am I going to be able to, as an individual?
Which is a very, very good point to raise. And the answer to that is do the maximum that you can do. Don't worry about governments. Don't worry about corporations. They're there. You can influence them, and I'll say this as well. You can vote for the Blues or the Reds, the Crips or the Bloods, right? But invariably, vested interests control a lot of what politics is all about. And it's not always necessarily for the good of the people, the people. It's for the good of vested interests, I would say. And that's not conspiratory. It's always been that way. They've just got very, very good at fine-tuning it now. Where you have got a vote and where you can make an impact individually is through your words, through your actions, through your interactions with others, whoever they are, whether they are people that you're working with, people that you're working for, people who work for you, your friends, your family, people that you drop into or bump into in any walk of life.
Yeah.
But the major one is where you put your dollar. That's where your voting is going to come into play. We vote unconsciously all the time with what we spend and how we spend. And we're getting to a stage now where if you really want to make an impact, if you do care about the climate, if you do care about the environment, if you care about animals being treated well, there's still, there's vegans and the vegetarians, but I'm an omnivore, but I won't touch an animal that's been raised in a CAFO, as an example, and industrialized. It needs to be pumped full of hormones and it's diseased and it's a mess. The food system that we've allowed to be created, that we've all participated in by driving cheap goods or driving the need for that, has created what we've got.
The convenience of the McDonald's McDouble had to have some sort of,
exactly.
And CAFO's commoditized animal food operation.
Yeah, it's basically what I call factory farms.
Yeah.
So you have this idyllic vision, which a lot of us do, of your beef and your milk comes from cows that just graze in the fields that you see as you're driving past.
Yeah.
What you're not seeing is the fact that 90% of the meat and the dairy that you get from the superstores that you're purchasing and eating comes from these industrial food lots. Where there's no grass, there's a lot of the animals never see sunlight, and again, I don't want to go on to a downer on that.
But
it's become aware of the world that you are living in and interacting in, and if any of that doesn't resonate with you, if you've got concerns about that, the way that that's impacting on your life, if you're not happy within yourself because you've got a weight issue or you've got a psychological issue, you've got to take responsibility for that yourself. And pointing the finger at corporations and pointing the finger at governments, how's that working for us?
Being mad about it, or it doesn't.
So the answer to that is yes, we might feel small and insignificant. We want 7 billion voices and all these massive, powerful entities are running and ruling the world. Is do what you can in your own world. Focus on the world that you interact with.
Love that.
That's it. And bring as much conscious awareness into your life as possible so that you're not doing things that could have a detrimental effect.
Yeah. You can start the ripple at least on your micro level to hopefully influence larger. What, so you're on this regenerative journey right now. I mean, how many years have you been?
Okay, so the regenerative journey started literally 5 years ago. Just 5 years ago.
Yeah.
However, it started for me, my connection with regenerative farming.
Yeah, exactly.
Started 5 years ago. I hadn't heard of it before.
Yeah.
Most people currently haven't. According to the latest consumer statistics, I think there's about 10-15% of people have even heard the term. It's growing in awareness now because it's getting a lot of press. And it will do in the next 1 to 2 years. I would imagine most people will get to hear of it. So we're aware of organics. I'll spin it back to you. What's your understanding of the benefit of organic that you're paying that premium for?
Ooh, the benefits of organic. I would say that it's food being grown without essentially artificial support.
Correct. No synthetic chemicals. So it doesn't have herbicides or pesticides or fungicides.
But an organic operation doesn't necessarily have to look like what you might think it could be.
Correct.
Like organic can look pretty gnarly.
Well, the biggest shock I had when I discovered regenerative agriculture and regenerative food was what I'd assumed, which you should never do, that organics was going to give me pesticide, chemical-free food, so it's not got toxins. It's not going to kill you. People say, oh, well, it's not going to kill you.
It could still be an organic.
It's the combination. We come into connection, I think the last time I did the research, 30,000 chemicals in our life. So oftentimes it's not on a daily. There's chemicals on this table, there's chemicals in the mind. So it's not that individually these chemicals are going to kill you. You don't have eat a strawberry that's been sprayed with insecticide and you drop dead, but there's toxicity in that. And it's the combination and the cumulative effect of all these different chemicals
when every day is getting
build up
hit
eventually to cause the dis-ease that we're now having to live with. So the two major system challenges we've got on, two of the major system challenges, crises that we've got in the world. One is agriculture and the other one is health. Agriculture as in food, health.
That really
they're intrinsically linked.
Exactly,
They're intrinsically linked. And there's a disconnect because people don't understand that in order to be healthy, you have to have certain things running well in your life. You need to be sleeping well. You need to exercise. You don't have to be a marathon runner or go down to the gym every night. A modicum of exercise, walking occasionally, etc., etc. You also need to eat high nutrition foods. Ideally, what we call phytonutrients. So nutrients are the basic building blocks of a healthy diet. Phytonutrients are the things that can give you the antioxidants. So people got bang on about blueberries and goji berries and cranberries being very, very good for you. So what organics are giving you is the toxicity free. They're not, what I found out 5 years ago, giving you the nutrient bump. And the reason behind that, without wishing to get into the details of farming, is that the organic farmers will still till and plow and cut into the land. And they're using a lot of biological amendments, which are not they're not toxic, but they're not necessarily beneficial to the key ingredient that drives nutrient density and phytonutrient density in food, which is the microbiota, which is in the soil. What's microbiota? That's the tiny little creatures.
Yeah, exactly.
If you go out there's a difference between dirt and soil. Dirt is inert. There's no life force in it. Yeah. The reason why we're here and having this conversation is that we've both got life force. I've probably not got as much as you because you're a little bit younger than me, but I'm still hanging in there.
I was going to say, you're doing pretty good, yeah.
I'm still hanging in there. But that life force animates everything that's by definition alive in the universe, alive on the planet. Same applies to the soil or the dirt. If it's not got life in it, it's called microbiota, these tiny little creatures that are actively operating in that soil to interact with plants. So what happens is the photosynthesis, which comes from the sun, creates carbons. It draws carbon out of the atmosphere, and that is the resource and the finance that the plant use to trade with this life force in the soil. So it basically bleeds, or they're called exudates. They're like little tears, and each one of those tears has got a chemical signal in it, which is communicating with the microfauna and the microbiota, is called, underneath the ground in the soil, and it's telling it that it needs a little bit of molybdenum or a little bit of calcium or a little bit of nitrogen, whatever its specific needs is. It sends a communication, and then it trades its sugars and its carbons in order to get these minerals. Then there's this healthy symbiotic relationship between the two. If you are spraying chemicals, if you're cutting into the land by plowing and tilling and cutting into it, you're killing all that life force off. In which case, you've got to come in, if you're a conventional farmer, with chemical fertilizers to build them up. But you're only putting, oftentimes is not, they call it NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Maybe 5 or 6 of the minerals will go on top of that as well. But there's 71 macro and micro minerals. If you want to be, if you want a healthy body, you've got to have all of those, which is why there's this multi-billion-dollar industry come up, which is supplements. So people want to sell you supplements to top up the fact that you're not getting it from your food.
Yeah, exactly.
So a very smart guy by the name of Hippocrates, 300 BC, I think it was 300 BC, said, let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. That is legit. You can cure diabetes, diabetes 2, not diabetes 1. You can cure that with changing your diet. The obesity epidemic. So we've got this obesity epidemic that's swept across America, and then we've exported it. You might have picked up by now, for your listeners, I'm not originally from North Carolina. Might have sneaked out with my accent.
Where are you from?
I'm originally from the northwest of England. So I'm from a town called Oldham, a textile town that used to pull cotton from here for several hundred years.
No way.
Then I moved over here in 2008. But so that connection with the soil is critical for our health.
So I want to dig on that because you're talking about organic.
Dig on the soil. Very good.
I want to dig.
Boom, boom.
The organic conversation around what you're saying. So from an organic farm can still miss a lot of this life force in the soil due to them still having to supplement their dirt to bring life to organic growth or whatever it may be.
And again, there's always echelons and layers.
For sure.
So there's a growing band, or has been a growing band for a while now, of organic farmers who are aware of that. and they have been moving more to whether it's biodynamic or regenerative.
Yeah.
And again, people, there's no need to get hooked up on the name. The key to regenerative agriculture is it follows a certain set of principles.
Yep.
And that is away from where we've moved with conventional farming. So with conventional farming, you go out into the Midwest and you can see thousands and thousands of acres of monocrops, whether it's soybean or corn. You've got these CAFOs, which are the industrial food lots where you've just got tens of thousands of cows all crammed in together. That's not natural. It's not the way that nature does it. In nature, you have biodiversity. And that's not just different food crops. That's all the different plants and shrubs and bushes that grow around it. So part of what we've done at Union Grove Farm, as far as regenerative agriculture is concerned, is study what regenerative farm is about, gain an understanding of what those core 6 principles are. And I'm not going to go into education mode now. I'll cover them in outline. The biodiversity is absolutely critical. So where you've got inner dirt, not soil, that's where the term regenerate comes from. You have to regenerate. Absolutely critical, hyper focus on the dirt. I call it an alchemical process. You're turning dirt, lead into soil gold. Right? And that could take, depending on how much time, energy, effort, money you put into invest in it.
Exactly.
That's a journey of transition that you need to go through, which is challenging.
Because
if you're a conventional farm, it could 4 years. You could do 4 to 7 years, depending on the speed and, as I said, the focus. And having a firm understanding and the knowledge of what you're doing. So our focus has been exactly that. We've got certain pieces of land that used to be forests that are highly degraded, high rock content. And then we've got farmland, which is much higher level, which we can accelerate more quickly. But the key to it is putting these, what we call cover crops. So we put different species of cover crops. And the miracle of what we've seen on this current farmland that's the center of our operation, which is Mapleview, used to be a dairy farm, dairy and corn farm up in Chapel Hill, is when we did this, we were able to transform that land in 2 years. And the previous farmer, the people who lived in the area, have been absolutely amazed to see the biodiversity and life force come back into that land.
So talk to me about what you implemented from a, what were you planting? What other steps did you take to go from the lead to gold, to go from the dirt to soil?
Okay, so the first thing was you asked the question, how do we get into regenerative farming? So let me just give you the little bit of an intro story as to
we can go back.
what I'm doing here today, how I came to be here. I met a gentleman called Greg Boland. Greg is a multi-generational farmer, going back father, grandfather, and into the echelons behind that, before that, up in Illinois. So he started off in Illinois. He was passionate about farming, as every farmer is. I've yet to meet a farmer who's not passionate about what they do. Incredible people. Not met anybody on the planet who work harder than these people. So regardless of you being a conventional farmer or organic farmer or a regenerative farmer, I've got high respect for farmers and farming people, farming communities. So he comes from this farming background. He took over the farm from his father after going to ag school, and then suddenly realized, like most small and medium-sized farms, his was about 700 acres, there wasn't a lot of money to be made in it. And that's an under-exaggeration. Over 50% of small to medium-sized farms in this country have been in debt for at least 10 years. There's a catastrophe that's happened that we've allowed to happen. So these people have fed us. They put money, they put food on the table, or allow us to put food on the table for ourselves and our families. And they are at the bottom of the food chain when it comes to the profit that's accrued as a result of them putting the labor into the fields. So most of the profit from a farm goes outwards and upwards. It goes into the food chain. You might end up, if you're buying organics, which I did. So my personal journey was, I've been an organic purchaser for 25 years because I was expecting it to be toxic free, but also a high level of nutrients. Didn't do my full research, obviously. And I was prepared to pay a premium for that. It used to be like 20%, then it was 40%. You can pay 2-3 times.
Oh my gosh,
or for organics now. So the old joke about Whole Foods, it's called whole paycheck for a reason.
That's right.
So the thing, and the other key with organics is it's only 5 to 6% of the market. So 94, 95% of people can't
Still
afford
a fraction.
to buy it.
Yeah.
They would buy it. I'm sure most people would buy organic if they were able to. So it's a niche market. It's only got 1% of the cropland. We've got 900 million acres of agricultural land in this country, and only 9 million of those are organic. And that's been capped at a level for probably 20 years. Regenerative is the next wave that's coming in. And we need to encourage that by getting farmers to understand this is an opportunity to actually make money, to put some enjoyment back into farming again. So Greg back in the day was a conventional farmer. He was following conventional generational knowledge and application, running a very good farm as his father had before him, but he wasn't making the money, and it was becoming more and more of a struggle. This is 30 years ago. This has been going on for a long time. So he decided to go out into the world and make his fortune. And that's exactly what he did. He discovered that he was very good in finance. Ended up going into banking, then investment banking, and then became a VC. And he's now one of the most successful VCs in the country. And he's come full circle.
Back to
like
farming.
a lot of people do. I've been on a full circle journey.
Yeah.
I use the Star Wars as an example. You could say Lord of the Rings. It's all about the hero or heroine or journey. Whoever you are, whatever your journey in life is, you've got an opportunity to step up and be something up and above who you are or who you think you are. It's all the stories that have ever been. So what he did was, after he'd gone through the VC, making his money in the VC, he decided he wanted to buy some land and do a little bit of farming. So when he and I met by happen chance, or what I like to call serendipity.
Exactly.
Look it up, folks. Was he and I were neighbors, and we just bumped into each other. Story for another time.
Yeah.
Over a period of 3 weeks, we worked on his land out the back. He's got a beautiful estate that he built out over about, I think it was initially 15 acres, then he expanded that out to 60 acres. So we did a little bit of back and forward. He'd got to know each other. A lot of shared interests around films and humour. And I just asked him one day, I said, so what is it you're building here? What the hell is it you're creating? He said, I'm building a vineyard. And I was like, oh, a winery? No, everybody says that. It's a table grape. This is for eating. Table grapes for eating. And he mentioned muscadine. I'll touch on that in a while. I'd never even heard of muscadine.
Yeah, we'll have to dig into that one.
And he turned around to me and he said, and what is it you do? And I said, I'm a solution provider. And there was this pregnant pause. And I mean pregnant pause.
Yeah.
And into that birthed a connection. And I just said, are you into a proposal? And he said, Martin, that's what I do for my daytime job, because he looks at businesses all the time. We sat down over the next 2 weeks. One night I sat down over a very good glass of wine. He has some very good wine. And basically asked him what he was seeking to achieve. What are your needs? What are your goals? What's the time parameters behind this? What do you see as your challenges? And I wrote it all down. Then I went away, cogitated, came back and said, right, this is how I can help you deliver it. And we shut that night. No contract, no employment.
Wow.
It was just, right, let's get this done.
Yeah.
And it's been an interesting journey for both of us.
Now, with that initial conversation, was regenerative in the mix for his idea?
It was at the time, again, like most farmers, it was a conventional farm, which would mean using Roundup for the herbicides and pesticides and the whole gamut. If people actually knew the amount of chemicals that were sprayed onto food crops, they would be a little surprised.
Yeah.
And it's the same for every food crop. Some worse. I think there's a consumer group that is becoming more and more well known that release something called the EWG Dirty Dozen every year.
Okay.
I think USA Today publishing, maybe Washington Post.
Yeah.
And that literally lists the top 12 fruits and vegetables that have got the highest levels of toxicity. Again, it's not going to kill you.
Yeah.
It's not poison.
Yeah.
It's just the highest levels of toxicity. Do you know which fruit or vegetable is the one that's got the highest level?
For some reason,
porous. It's porous.
It's not apples, is it?
No, a strawberry.
Strawberry.
So a strawberry will literally, it imbibes,
absorb
it's like
it.
skin.
Yeah.
So grapes are number 5, by the way. They're usually in the top 5.
Okay.
So what when I came into it, I was saying, right, have you ever thought about organics? And when you look into the other thing that puts people off organics as well, or puts farmers off, is the bureaucracy that's involved in that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bureaucracy you have to go through. There's a lot of expenditure you have to go through. It's very expensive to run it beyond that because you're basically switching out synthetic chemicals for biological chemicals.
Got it, yeah.
Although, as I said, there's different levels you can bring in compost, etc. So Greg wasn't interested in that. And I wasn't interested in working in a conventional farm where I had to go anywhere near spraying chemicals, let alone eating them.
Yeah.
So I tapped into one of my superpowers. So I'm very good at extemporizing, which basically means you give me a subject and I'll stand in front of a stage of 1,000 people and talk about it. I love to build relationships with people, but what really lights me up more than anything else is coming up with creative solutions, which is why I moved from sales to business development to marketing to strategic development into consultant, and then what I call myself now, a solution provider. And what that is about is tying in and initially into what I call intuitive deep dive research. So before you can come up with a solution,
the due diligence of it,
you've got to know what you're dealing with. You've got to have an understanding of the market, the product, the service, the people.
Definitely.
Those people that can come in and support you, what tech's out there that can support it, what latest technology, and what is there anything else in there that
because you're starting at zero at this point. Like
never done any farming before,
never done any farming
in agriculture, but I've been involved in I think 6 different industries and markets now. I've worked on 3 different continents. I've worked all the way up to the greasy pole of C-suite in corporate. I've been a one-man business myself. So if you're a solution provider, you can find solutions to anything. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to have an inquisitive mind and ability to connect with people. And a nose for sniffing out the best solutions within the budget of your client or your company. And that's what I've been doing for the past 10 years. And I love it. It helps if you've got a passion for what you do as well.
100%.
So I get paid to do something which is basically a hobby. Don't tell Greg that.
So in that discovery process you were going through, that's when you first found this thing. Like how were you introduced?
I found this. I've got to give Greg praise for this as well.
Okay.
This is why he and I worked together. We touched on Myers-Briggs earlier. And we found out, folks who are listening or watching this, I am an ENFP. Not a great surprise. Extroverted, intuitive. Feeling perceptive. So I'm more on my feelings than on the reasoning side, although I'd like to think I've got a good reasoning mind. I'm obviously an extrovert, but one of my key attributes that I value more than anything else is this intuition and instinct. We all have it. They talk about a sixth sense. I used to know it when I first delved into this properly and became aware of it 25 years ago, when I had my first great wake-up call, which moved me out of corporate life and ended up me going all around the world traveling. Was I'd always heard intuition with the prefix women before it. It was women's intuition. That's all I'd ever heard. So I didn't think it had anything to do with dudes. What I found out is that women are just more finely attuned to it. We all possess it. Like we possess 5 senses, it's 6 senses. So I tapped into that from an early stage, and it literally is like a superpower. You're following your gut. People say it all the time. I followed my gut. It was my instincts kicked in. I had a feel about this person or about this opportunity. And I've just more and more tapped into that. And I've dubbed it my still small voice within. So it's what whispers to us all the time. I can be chatty and outgoing and vociferous. And if you are like that and you're not spending time with yourself in quiet solitude, you're not going to hear it whispering to you. And when I did, and I followed it 25 years ago, it set me off on such a journey, externally and internally, and led it into a completely different world and a completely different experience. That when I do hear it, when I've heard it from that point to this, I follow it like a laser beam.
No way. Okay.
Like a laser beam.
That locked in on it.
So at that stage, when Greg and I decided to get together, it was he wanted a 60-acre vineyard building around his beautiful property. It's like a Napa Valley house. Wanted a 60-acre, and he chose muscadine because he's got very keen instincts as well. you don't get to be as successful as he is in the VC world unless
Yeah.
you've got really keen business instincts and intuition. So he's very good at picking winners. Paying myself a compliment there. Do you notice that? Yeah, it's got a vested interest in me succeeding other than paying my money. So that really, I went to him initially, said organic, and he was like, no, for very good reasons.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I don't want to go down that route either. So there's got to be an alternate. So I started looking around, and then one day he flew back from one of his business trips in San Fran, and he said, I just saw a really interesting movie documentary on the plane coming back.
The Biggest Little Farm?
I always get it mixed up. It's
Or
either
the
the
Littlest
Biggest Little
Big
farm?
Farm
or the Little Biggest Farm.
Yeah.
It's one or the other. Look it up. It's on Netflix.
Yeah, that's a great one.
And I watch. So whenever he says, if he advises me on something, I follow it straight off. So that night I got it up on Netflix and I watched it.
Nice.
And it blew my head away.
Right?
My instinct was just my intuition, my spidey sense, I call it, just kicked in and was janged. And I was like, there's something in this. So I opened up my laptop and I went in. So this, what I call instinctive or intuitive deep dive research is that literally somebody will say something, my instinct will kick in. I'll open it up, I'll type something in, and then I go down the rabbit hole. And where somebody might give up after 30 minutes or an hour, I'm just keep going. It'll be something that I'll see left of field over here that's got nothing to do with the initial thought or suggestion. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I'll follow that and I'll follow that.
I call that going down the wormhole.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it led me to a lady called Dr. Elaine Ingham.
Okay.
And she is a firebrand lady who's regarded as one of the, if not the top soil biology experts on the planet.
Fascinating. Back to building the foundation.
Amazing lady. She should be on Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
So I read a couple of the pieces and then went onto YouTube, as you do, and I found this first presentation that she made. It's a bunch of English farms, conventional farmers in England, and she blew me away. And I knew it was one of those times where I thought, whatever you're selling, I'm buying. And from there, I just dived into her work.
Nice.
And that led me into regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
And she fully explained what it was about, what the benefits were, and everything she said just rang true. And at that point, you've got to go from your instincts to action. So
Exactly.
I thought, she was difficult to get hold of. She spent a lot of time in New Zealand. She was out in California. So I knew she had a bunch of consultant support. So I found the best one she had, and that was a guy called Todd Harrington, and he was up in Connecticut. So I reached out, and if I find somebody or an organization or a product or a service that I think could be a benefit to myself or the organization I'm working for,
your project,
I don't just want to connect into them as a potential customer. I want to get to know them, which means you've got to get to the top.
Yeah.
And that, again, where I bring my skill set of being able to connect, reach out, connect, and get in front of.
Yeah.
And the key to that then is not going and saying, I've got a need, I've got a want. This is what you need to do for me. It's always, what can I do for you? And ideally, go in and do your research in advance and say, these are areas that you seem to be interested in, or you've got a need
How I could help or
What if I
support.
pull this in? What if I pull that in? What if I do that? And you've got a connection. And then all of a sudden you're dealing with the top guy or the top woman, and you're going to get, it's this method in my madness. I call it, what is the word? Reciprocal, it'll come to me. Altruism. Selfish altruism. Altruism when you just do something for somebody without having anything back. It doesn't exist. Everything that we do in life, whether you're Mother Teresa or you're St. Francis of Assisi, you do things because it makes you feel good about yourself. That's not a bad form of selfishness if you're doing things that benefit others. And that's what regenerative agriculture is about, and that's what Union Grove Farm is about. We're going to build probably the most profitable and productive table grape vineyard on the East Coast for certain.
For sure.
The goal is the most profitable and productive and impactful table grape vineyard in the United States of America. In order to do that, we've got to be on our A game. In order to do that, we individually who work there, whether it's Greg at the top, myself as his second in command conductor of the orchestra for the vineyard operation, or anybody who's working on the farm, and we're all as one on that. He calls it a communist society, the biggest capitalist I've ever met. He likes the communist analogy. But we work together as a singular team, as a combined team. But it's also bringing in these solution providers. It's finding the right people where we've got a core need, and then building that relationship out.
Yeah.
That's what's led us to this.
When you were first learning about the soil, I guess the lens that she was taking at this is what needs to happen in the soil to create what we were talking about before, that life force.
Yeah.
So you were taking that in to see what needs to happen at Union Grove.
Yes.
Back to that, back to the conversion aspect of that. What were you learning that you knew you guys needed to do, or like what did you learn to implement to be able to turn your soil from, or your dirt to your soil?
Very good question. That was where, again, we had to basically rip up the conventional mindset of farming that everybody at the farm at that time had.
Yeah.
Which is a challenge. That's a challenge because people are very much, we like to be in our comfort zones. Most of us, most of the time.
Oh, for sure.
And we don't like change. We're change resistant beings. The entrepreneurs of this life, the people like your Bill Gates and your Steve Jobs, the movers and groovers of the world who turn the world upside down and bring in new innovation, are people who love change. They welcome change. They run to change. And that was, again, where Greg and I had a connection from the get-go.
Yep.
So I referenced the fact that I'm an ENFP. Greg, I found out, was an INTJ. He's a polar opposite to me. Literally opposite mirror image. Right? With the exception of one letter.
The intuition.
N.
Yeah.
He's got superpowers. And one of them is his intuition, his instincts. Unlike anybody I've ever met in my life before. It's very, very impressive to see and experience. I've got that as a heightened skill set.
Yeah. So you're able to align on that. Yeah, you're able to align on that vision. So we know this is the right way.
Yeah. So what that allowed me to do, again, the biggest compliment that guy could ever pay me, ever, was taking me on. Absolutely no reason. Why would it? Name me the top 5 English vineyard managers in the world. They don't exist.
There's a short list.
And I showed him what my background was.
We got one in the room right now, but that's
showed him my resume and all the rest of it. He went with his instincts. He felt at that time, I found my guy. And I felt, and I still feel, I've found the opportunity of my lifetime. Everything I've done in my life.
Yeah.
All the ups, all the downs, all the what I perceived to be failures, all the successes led me to be in front of Greg that day for those 3 weeks and then have that conversation. And then we connected till one of us exudes our last breath, literally, in this to the finish. And we're going to do it. There's no two ways about it. So it was very important that he allowed me to go out and do what I'm good at, which is to find solutions.
Exactly.
And build a solution team.
Yeah.
So it's building the internal team, and then it's building all this orchestra of external support that we need. And having his instincts kick in, because what he does every time I brought something to the table and said, I think we need to move into this area, or I think we need to be bringing this in, or I think we need to be looking at it that way, his first response is always no. Because it keeps me on my mettle.
Yeah.
And then I go away and fine tune it. And I come back like a good business person, talking to a business person. I lay out a cost, a benefit, and a risk. If you can't justify what you're putting on the table, certainly not to a business person, and certainly not to a business guy of his acumen, then you shouldn't be having the conversation. So that I would never dream of taking anything into Greg's office and put it on his table unless I'm very, very, very confident it's going to be a benefit to us.
And it's been pretty well built out from your standpoint to know the difference.
Coming from a conventional mindset, a generational mindset as a farmer, for him to then open up to this as well meant that his instincts kicked in. And he suddenly saw what I saw initially, he saw with guns blazing, and it suddenly went overnight from a 60-acre vineyard to 1,000 acres. Literally, we didn't go, well, we'll go for 60, I think we can do 200, and then we went to 500. He literally came in one day and went, all right, let's do 1,000 acres. And again, it's not about size, but it is about impact. And the journey that he and I and the team have been on, because we've got this incredible team of support in there as well, whatever role you are, whether you're a field worker or you're one of the leadership team, each one of us has got a core role to play in this. that has to be now synergized. So the term I used earlier about the conductor, you have to, in a business, you have to have somebody who's a conductor. They don't have to be the head pianist or the head violinist or the head trombonist. They know how to build an orchestra. And then you go to the patron, in which case this is Greg, and say, right, what is it you want to play? Is this an opera? Is this a ballet? Is this an orchestra management? And then you make sure that you pull this team together at the highest level. I want to work with world-class people. I want to work with people with passion and commitment and enthusiasm and positivity.
Yeah.
Really important, that. Positivity.
Yeah, you're going to be around them every day.
Yeah, otherwise it can pull you down. And I know that from personal experience. I've been there myself in my life. So getting the right quality of team and the right quality of thought process and the right quality of resonance is really important. And then we've got to come together cohesively and learn.
Yeah.
And then apply it. We've got to take the action.
Because it's a relatively, I mean, like you said, it's a new concept. So you're trying to find people who are in tune with a concept that I would imagine the people who know about regenerative farming or know how to do it is a small group of people.
Well, this is the remarkable thing. It's nothing new under the sun. It's not a new concept. This concept, and I got tutored on this just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I went to they're called International Farming. They're a conglomerate or a corporation company who basically buy farmland and then lease it out to farmers. The vast majority of people who farm in this country are leasing it from someone. Amazing company, great people, and they had this probably one of the best conferences. There's lots of conferences out there. You've got to be very particular about where you go to. And I went to this one. There's the two best ones without shadow of a doubt on the planet now. One of them is in Chapel Hill, and the other one I have to fly out to Nebraska or Arizona for, which is a Regenerative Organic Nexus Summit, which I'll be going to in February. This one was 2 weeks ago, and it was put together by an extraordinary group of people. And the keynote, that the person who put this together, Eli, the wife and organizer, wife of the CEO, but organizer of that event, phenomenal event, brought in a gentleman called Tyler. And Tyler, his indigenous name is Buffalo, Maine. So he's an indigenous Native American from up in Nebraska. Funnily enough, Omaha, where I'm going to be going to this conference in 4 weeks' time. And he explained how regenerative agriculture has been around for 15,000 years.
Yeah,
it's how the indigenous people basically interacted with Mother Earth. With respect and with an understanding of the energies and the resonance in the earth that then grows up in the crops, and the way that they showed respect for the buffaloes that they killed, etc. So it's been around for a long time, and then we lost it. We went all industrialized and we went all technologically wide. And again, phenomenal. For 100 years, we fed ourselves with those methodologies, and now we're getting a pushback from Mother Earth. So the way I term it now is that instead of fighting with Mother Earth, because she'll always eventually kick our ass, we need to learn to dance with her. And that's what this is about. It's a more natural way of understanding the biology of the soil, the earth, and the plants, and how we can best use that in a commercial environment to grow food to feed ourselves.
Yeah, one of the examples.
Healthy food.
Yeah. One of the examples I loved from that the documentary you were talking about was when they were having the problems with the snails on the apple trees. And they're like, how do we get rid of the snails? They're like, well, get the ducks. And the ducks eat the snails, and then we're good.
Well,
and it's like,
again,
I can only imagine there's
that was
cycles
my
like
favorite part, fun enough, as well.
Really?
that and the gophers and the coyotes. But it was. Again, we got a problem. And it was the citrus trees they were on.
Citrus trees,
And they were trying to think the way through how we do it. And then someone had a intuitive thought, which was based on, I think, someone, whether they did the research and found out, or whether it was an intuitive thought. All they needed to do was release the ducks, which were part of that biodiversity of their farm.
Right, yeah.
And they just went in, and it was like eating candy for those guys. And that's what we're learning on the farm as well. It's this balance effect that when you bring something in, it's got multiple benefits. I'll use an example. Dane Jensen is our vineyard manager, overseer of the vineyard operation, the build of the vineyard, the run of the vineyard. But he's also a vineyard shepherd. So we brought him in from California, where there's a key component of regenerative agriculture is livestock integration. Well, how the hell do you integrate livestock in a vineyard?
Yeah.
Well, you're not bringing cows in, and you're not bringing goats. Goats will eat everything. Cows will trample everything down. So I did my research and I found out that New Zealand introduced sheep into their vineyards best part, I think it was 15, 20 years ago. And now 70% of their vineyards have got sheep integrated into their operation.
No way.
Why is that? Well, there's 3 times as many sheep in New Zealand as there are people. They're known for their lamb. But they've also got an incredible wine industry as well.
Oh, for sure.
So they put the two together. Long story short, California then took on board with it as well. And what you do is you use your sheep as mower. You don't have to send tractors in with diesel to mow your fields. The sheep do it. They also fertilize as they're mowing. So instead of putting out toxics into the environment and diesel overspill, etc., they're actually fertilizing with the poop and with the pee. That stimulates the plants. Unbelievable fertilizer, unlike anything like you could get from a synthetic chemical. And they're also weeders, so we're not having to do the herbicide because they will eat the weeds as well. Now, in the early stages, you can't put them in because they eat the vines when we put the new vines in. But over a period of time, as they lignify and grow stronger, the sheep can come in and do all those incredible. So that, again, that's just being in tune with nature. It's how the buffalo, before we wipe the buffalo out in this continent, that's how they rotated round. And that's the key to livestock, is you rotate them. You don't just let them run free and eat where they want. Dane and his team put these mobile fencing around, and they'll move them every day or every other day into the next 2 acres, So you're not overgrazing, you're not causing compaction, and you're giving the benefit across the vineyard. Behind that, and then we grow what they call cover crops in between the vines, which gives it the biodiversity.
What would you be growing?
They're called cocktail cover crops. So you plant up to 16 seeds. They could be called brassicas, legumes, different grasses. All different types of crops. Dependent. We do a lot. So whilst we're in tune with Mother Nature, we also do a lot of science. So there's science involved in this as well. So we will do soil testing. We do sap testing, which is basically like giving a plant a blood test. That finds out what's in the soil as far as the biology, what's in the soil as far as the chemicals are concerned. And then we can come in with things like compost and compost teas to balance the soil out. And then you need to find out what it's uptaking into the plant and uptaking into the fruit.
Exactly.
So you've got to do your testing and analysing there. And then you can fine tune it. Over a period of that 4 to 5 years, once you've got your soil healthy, you can pretty much stand back and the plant will take care of all its needs. Its nutrient needs, its water needs, and its immunity needs.
When you're first trying to, get it, like expand into a new place where nothing has been done yet, what did you have to do before you even planted the vines? Like, were there steps that had to be taken on that?
Yeah, very, very good question. And that's what we're doing. We've got Greg's bought 4 pieces of land in and around the Chapel Hill area, roughly 200 acres apiece. And they're at different levels of preparation prior to what we could plant it.
For sure.
So the main site at Maple View, that's probably about 140 planting acres. Over the last 2 years, before we even thought about planting vines, we've been doing the cover crops and then bringing the sheep in. Those multi-seed cover crops will be, and again, depend on what the soil analysis tells us, is dependent on what seeds we bring in, because they're going to put the roots in and they put the extra, some of them are nitrogen fixers. All different minerals will be put into the soil depending on what your cover crops are. Plus it then helps to build the infrastructure, you might call it, for the microbiota that's growing as well. It helps for the soil to then come back into life.
Got it.
And then you put in the compost teas, what you make from compost. And we tweak that again in line with the needs of the soil that we want to grow in. And the other big thing that I've got to mention as well is fungal matter. So mycorrhiza fungal is probably the most intelligent life form on the planet. We're way lower down than fungal matter. Very, very important. Exactly. So on all the different pieces of land, they're all at different levels of preparation.
I get that.
So the land that we've got at Maple View, this year we planted 16 acres, which is about 8,000 vines. We're in preparation now, or Dane and Colin and the team are putting out another 55 acres. So in April time, 30,000 more vines will arrive. And then over the next 5 years, we'll be planting 30,000 a year.
Now, one of the things I think I heard this from Will is they talk about like closing loops on their farm. So like one loop for them was like trying to feed the cows or like taking care of the waste and doing compost. Are you guys finding like closing those loops with animals or like dealing with waste as a part of your regenerative process?
Again, very, very good question. Very, very good question on that. There's different levels of loops. Is the way. Ideally, obviously, your ideal, as far as regenerative is concerned, is not to be bringing in anything that looks like an amendment.
Exactly.
Whether it's synthetic chemical or whether it's a biological chemical, which we have to use in the early stages until we can get that soil health up. What we do, therefore, is we utilize a lot of compost. So one of the loops that we have put together is a loop within the county. One of them is within the towns, and then ultimately it will be the closed loop within the farm. So that everything that we need in order to keep that operation running at an optimal level, including the soil and the health of the plant, the vines and the fruit itself, will be self-contained within the farm. But at the moment, because we need that extra organic matter to build our compost, we tap into 80% of the leaves that fall in Chapel Hill and Carrborough come to our farm. But what we're doing with that is we're diverting it from landfill. So we're saving the towns of Chapel Hill and Carrborough a lot of money having to pay to drop it in the landfill. And there's major issues with landfill because they're running out of space. The other one is a company called Asplund that cut the power lines or cut around the trees around the power lines for Duke. They cut the tops of the trees off and then mulch it, and then that would go in the landfill. We divert that to the farm as well. Then we build our the compost up around that. What we've also got in alliance to that is a vermicompost operation, which is basically worm poop. So we bought this again. It was an investment up front that we had to make for the actual unit itself, and then we bought 30,000 red wiggler worms, which is a specific type of worm. But the beautiful thing again with regenerative farm is once we put those 30,000 in, they don't just poop and create this incredibly rich compost. They breed.
Oh, wow.
And it doesn't cost us anything. We don't have to pay them to breed. We don't have to pay them to poop. We just provide food.
Not running payroll on the worm supply every 2 weeks.
No union. I know this is a right to work state, which means it's a right to fire you for whatever reason. And unions seems to be a thing of the past. So these guys are working 24/7, 365.
Wow.
And do a phenomenal, critically important role for us. And then from that, we convert it into compost tea, which will turn a bucket of about 30 pounds of vermicompost into 1,000 gallons through this extraction process. That will then become self-contained. All we need is food waste that we're taking from maybe schools or from the food retailers that throw it away. So again, we're diverting. So a lot of it is a closed loop, as I said, within the county, within the town. And now more and more as we move forward, we'll be looking to close loop that within the farm.
That's interesting about you can absorb things from the community that would be waste and utilize them in regenerative farming.
Absolutely.
So the aspect of this being a vineyard, I think, is fascinating. Why a vineyard? Why a muscadine grape? Like,
because Greg Bowen's a genius. What did I say at the start? His instincts and his intuition are razor sharp. So must be 7 years ago. He and I joined forces 5 years ago. In advance of that, he'd had this germ seed idea that he wanted to build a wraparound vineyard around his estate. And he, being a very astute businessman, he thought, well, I want a look of a vineyard to go around my Napa Valley house, but I also want to make money from it. So I'm not just doing it. I'm not just going to put it out there. I can commercialize this. So he looked at wine and then realized you can't grow. It's challenging to grow wine in our environment. There are some really good wineries in North Carolina, but it's a major challenge. And then he came across a gentleman called Jeff Bloodworth, who I called the Merlin of Muscadine, who's another North Carolinian resident. He lived in Hillsborough. Happened chance, serendipity. Long story short, Greg came across this seedless muscadine that he saw on the internet. His spider senses kicked in. He contacted the company and they said, oh, the master cultivator of this grape is only 15 minutes away from you. We'll connect you in with him.
That's wild.
And that set us forth on this journey to become a table grape, not a winery.
Not a winery.
And the reason why we chose muscadine, which I also called the grits of grapes. Right,
the grits of grapes.
Grits are known in the southeast.
Exactly.
They're not really known outside of that. I've never heard of grits before I came here. And some people love them, and some people don't at all.
I was raised
and
on
it's the
them,
same with a muscadine. Have you ever had a muscadine grape?
No, I feel like the ones that you get at the grocery store, they call them like the cotton candy grape? Isn't that what is that?
No. That's completely different. So a muscadine is indigenous to the southeast.
Yeah, no,
it's
I don't think I
actually
have.
the state fruit of North Carolina.
Yeah, I don't think
the
I had
oldest muscadine vine on the planet is out on Roanoke Island. It's 400 years old. It looks like an oak tree. So North Carolina have got a close connection to this fruit, but there's only, at the last count, they reckon there's between 1,200 and 1,500 acres of vineyard in the whole of the state. I mean, that's the size of an average vineyard in California.
Yeah.
So, and the reason behind that is that they do make mainly wine with it, jams and jellies. There's a lot of pick your own, but it's never really got into the major food retailers at scale. There are people who like it, so you'll find it in our locale. You go into many a retailer store in North Carolina, you'll find muscadines in season.
Yeah. What color would a muscadine grape
It could be golden or green or black.
Oh, okay.
All different shapes and sizes. There's 120 different varietals, but the key to it is the skin's like leather and there's a lot of seeds. And people don't like seeds in fruit these days. It's all seedless. So the rest of the table grape market is all seedless grape. You can either get conventional or you can get organic. 99% of the table grapes that are eaten on the East Coast, including North Carolina, come from California. It's not very sustainable to be shipping fresh fruit or fresh products or any product 3 days, 2,500 miles. So we will be local when we start knocking this out. We will be a local supplier to a food store, normally is within 250 to 400 miles. We're going to be local upstate New York, Florida Keys, into the Midwest. So there's a big market opportunity that we can move into and take advantage of if we've got the right product. And Jeff Bloodworth is a genius at cultivating a grape. So he's been working like nuclear fusion on turning the seeded muscadine with a leathery skin into this beautiful, thin-skinned, seedless muscadine fruit, the likes of which, ladies and gentlemen listeners, you've never tasted anything like this in your life. Now, obviously, I'm a little biased. Because I'm involved in the vineyard.
I really want to try one now.
But when you try this grape, it is phenomenal. And the other thing is, and this is again part of my rich, dubious experiences in life, I got very heavily involved for a number of reasons about 20 years ago in health and nutrition. So I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. Although our in-house scientist once said, you are a scientist, Martin, because you test, you trial, and you ask questions all the time. Science, So I'm a scientist in my spare time. But the key to it was understanding, again, when I got a few health challenges, and someone close to me had a few health challenges, understanding the impact of food on that. Poor quality food, nutrient lacking food, high processed food,
everywhere.
fast foods. So I have a basic understanding of what that looks like. So the best quality food you can get are not just high in nutrients, but they're also high in these phytonutrients, which is why blueberries have become a multi-billion-dollar market. 15 years ago, they were the size of the muscadine market, and now they're a global phenomenon. And the thing that sold them, because most, certainly conventional blueberries or organic blueberries, you can't taste them. They look nice, they're plump, they're purple, but they're tasteless. But they've got high antioxidants. It's the antioxidants that people associate with them, which has made them popular.
It's a big part of like the marketing and the sales pitch for them.
And it's what people mainly buy off. They will buy off taste and they'll buy off health. Health is becoming more and more important because we've got such chronic disease that we've already talked about. So if you can nail those two, if you can find a food product that's both tasteful, and easy to eat, and is healthy, then you've got a potential market that you can move into with that. And that's what we've got. So the proof of the great pudding will be in 2 years' time when we get our first major volume off the line. And then we'll be going into the major food retailers with an alternate to California seedless grape. And at that point, we'll be kicking open the door.
So you've had some test crops then?
For the last, let me think, 4 years, or 5 years actually, because Greg had planted so the first stage one seedless was a razzmatazz grape that we've had on test in Weaver Street, Markets, which is they've got 4 stores, great local co-op store who are very, very passionate about supporting local farmers and organic and healthy. They're moving into regenerative now. So we built up a really close relationship with those guys who've been fantastically supportive. And that's allowed us to get in small volume, this product on the shelves and seeing how well it's performed, even to the point of doing individual personal in-store testing with it as well. So we know we've got something that's going to appeal to the market.
For sure.
It's now we've got to really optimize the growing of the vineyard operation to make sure that we have a consistent product that we can get out on a regular basis and build the volume up.
So maybe a little bit of a backtrack here to regenerative farming, the conversion from conventional to regenerative.
Can I just add for the audience as well? This does say liquid death, but it's water, I've been told. I've been off the base for 200 days. If this gets picked up by my friends in England, you'll be getting calls into the switchboard. Why is he drinking beer?
Well, the people at the checkout won't let you buy it with small children. They think it's beer too. So
liquid death. Okay. Anyway, we digress.
Artesian mountain water. When you think about, almost the pitch to a conventional farmer thinking about regenerative, I feel like I read somewhere you talking about how it can also be more of a profitable venture for them.
Absolutely. The key, the benefits of regenerative farming, moving to regenerative agriculture are myriad. Myriad. And I'm really glad you brought that up. There's a benefit to the end consumer because you're going to be providing them with the most healthful food, whatever the food is, whether it's livestock or whether it's a food crop or whether it goes into packaging. You're always better buying fresh product, fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, fresh cuts of meat. But again, for convenience, people do buy a lot. But again, if it's regenerative, it's going to have these high levels of nutrient and phytonutrients. So it's going to be a lot healthier. It's also healthier for the farmer. For those very reasons. As a result, once you go through that first 3 to 4 years, sometimes 5 years, it depends, again, on your focus and how well you're guided and the system that supports you, you're going to come out the other end with less chemical inputs. You're not going to be reliant on chemical fertilizers. You're not going to be reliant on the insecticides and the pesticides of any description. You're not going to be reliant on having to throw machines out into your field all the time because a lot of that will be being taken care of naturally. Sounds a little bit like pie in the sky magic, but it's not. It's back to nature. And you mentioned this earlier, is this a new phenomenon? It's starting to take off now. It's starting to get well known in the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years because big food and big ag and big chem even has woken up to regenerative agriculture. The laggard at the moment is the farmer because the farmers have been farming, as I said, multi-generational. They've been farming in a conventional mindset. Those that are still around are either doing it successfully and profitably. So why would you want to risk changing your profitable, successful model? And that certainly applies to the big boys who've consolidated the small and medium-sized farms and have got these ginormous farm operations which are built at scale, economies of scale. For the small and medium-sized farmers, however, they're the ones who've had the pinch. And they're the ones that I would like to reach out to primarily to say there's an alternate way of doing this.
Got it.
North Carolina, I heard our commissioner for NCDA speak on 3 occasions this year, Steve Troxler, who's not just our commissioner for agriculture in North Carolina, he's a passionate farmer. He's been a farmer for generations as well, passionate about supporting North Carolina agriculture. And one of the key things that he raised as a challenge for agriculture in North Carolina in the years ahead, in the next decade, is development. Residential and business development.
Taken away from available land.
Huge lick. This is the best state in the union. Come on, guys, you've got to say that. I only moved here because of a young lady, not a young lady, my lady wife brought me here in the first place, but I'm a traveling man, so I never expected to last more than 5 years, and that was 2008. This is my home now. It's not just my home country, it's my home state. And I'm passionate now about agriculture, which is a key component part of what we do here. It's a $100 billion industry in North Carolina. 17 billion of that is actually farming, and it's under a lot of pressure, and no one's under more pressure than the farmers themselves. We've got high alcoholism rates, we've got high suicide rates, we've got high divorce rates. When you lose your farm, you lose your home.
Yeah.
And this multi-generational aspect of farming is starting to become under threat as well, because the younger generation is looking how the fathers and the grandfathers have struggled to make ends meet. You're having to send, your wife or husband's going out doing a second job. It's a struggle.
Yeah.
And because people are pouring into this state, coming in from California and from the north or wherever, because it's a beautiful state. We've got all this incredible infrastructure. We've got these great universities and schools. We've got the ocean and we've got the mountains. Is that will continue.
It's a boom town.
And it's still relatively, compared to New York and LA, relatively cheap. Not as expensive, should I say, is that as a result of that, infrastructure is going to grow. Housing. Look at on Chapel Hill. Every time I look around, there's another piece of land got a housing complex on it, or apartment blocks. That's happening across the state. So in the next 10 years, Steve Troxler says we're going to lose about 1 million of the 8 million acres of farmland. So that's a threat. What regenerative agriculture will do is allow you to not have to spend as much money on inputs. You're not going to spend as much money
You're eliminating all those
exactly.
extras.
So that reduces down, and suddenly you can balance your books, and you can do it on a smaller space. So you're not having to have as much to achieve more.
Interesting.
Right? And that's been proven out now over the last 15 years. So people, the movers and groovers, the lions of the movement, the pioneers in this movement. I've mentioned to you offline before, Gabe Brown. I call him the godfather of regenerative agriculture, an absolute monumental guy who came into it, wasn't from farming stock himself. I believe he took over the family farm, and was struggling like every other, not every other farmer, many farmers do struggle. And he was introduced to regenerative agriculture. Then he applied it, and then he applied his mind and his intelligence to it, and he suddenly turned it around and created a very profitable. Again, that's a separate story for another stage. What he did with his farm up in North Dakota was just phenomenal. And then he got a passion for wanting to share that with other farmers who were in the same stress levels that he'd been under.
For sure.
And it's all about finances. It's all about finances. Half the farmers in this country have been in debt for at least 10 years.
Because of expensive machinery, other input.
Because machineries have become more and more expensive than the satellite link now, and and they've got technology attached to them. And every time we're always going to have a Ukraine war, we're always going to have a war in the Middle East. There's always going to be the next war somewhere. And what does that? Every time we have a war, we pour tens of billions of dollars into them to buy armaments, but the gas prices always go up. They never come down. You never have an incident in the world where gas prices have dropped by 50%. No, it's shot up again. Whenever chemicals, petrochemicals go up, that's going to affect synthetic chemicals in agriculture or pharmaceuticals, because that's how we make them.
Yeah, so they're on the short end of the stick.
So it's only ever going to go up. And because Mother Nature is pushing back, like with antibiotics, there's so many pharmaceutical drugs out there now that we've got these antibiotic resistant strains coming in. It's the same with the pests and the diseases out in agriculture land. So you're having to put more and more chemicals on, and the chemicals are becoming more and more expensive. That's not sustainable.
No.
So what regenerative farming is going to offer the farmers is an opportunity to step back from that and apply regenerative principles that will allow them to actually put more dollars in their own pocket.
Yeah. Man, it's inspiring to hear you talk about it. And then, in the back of my mind, it's like, you hit on the 6% of the food supply is organic, or like the 90%, or how much of the current food infrastructure is built on these industrialized operations.
Now, and that's another look at we've got these incredible things now called smartphones. They're only smart
for our dumb
if the person who's using it has got a modicum of intelligence. You can access the information on the planet within reason. I'm sure there's certain government sites that we're not allowed onto yet, unless you're a good hacker. But you've got information there.
For sure.
If you can pull yourself away from TikTok and YouTube, and I'm a bit of a YouTuber, so I'm not saying I'm averse to that.
YouTube can be educational, so it makes it tough.
But the information's out there if you want to do a little bit of research. And over 50% of farms, small and medium-sized farms, have been in debt for 10 years.
Yeah.
last time I looked, about 90 to 95% of the profit that's attributed from a farmer doing the farming goes out into the food system.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. And then at the back end, the consumer is having to pay top dollar because they jack the prices up if you're bringing something like organics out.
Yeah.
So the idea behind regenerative farming is that it will allow the farmer to make a profit again, maintain his farm, be less likely to want to sell it to a developer who's dangling big wads of money in front of him, encourage his children to come in behind him and keep the generational chain going. Plus, it will give the end consumer an opportunity outside that 5% who can afford organic to actually buy nutrient-dense food that will be helpful for themselves and the family. That's what I call a virtuous circle. In order to achieve that, the people in the middle currently taking most of the profit need to contribute. And if they don't, the end consumer is going to decide who they're buying from. So there's an opportunity, I'll get back to this again, to you as a consumer,
to make
whoever you are out there listening to this, to make a conscious decision every time you go into a store to do your weekly shop or your daily shop for your food, or if you go online, which more and more people are doing these days, is what are you actually buying? What are you seeking to achieve? Empty calories that have been laden with chemical additives, or a nutrient-dense food to feed yourself and your family. And if you choose the latter, invariably that's going to be either organic or regenerative. And then we'll shift the needle. And then everybody benefits. The people in the middle will probably make a little less money, but it's not going to kill them.
When you're talking about, you mentioned like large food corporations waking up to regenerative, what is it that you think is making them wake up, or what has led to that?
I know exactly what's making them up. And it's the much maligned Gen Zs and millennials, right? So there's a lot of talk, particularly amongst the boomer generation. Every generation, at some point, you're a millennial. You'll look upon generations when you get grey-haired like me, and you'll look back and think...
I don't know if I'll get any grey hair, but...
if you look to get some grey hair.
I'll keep it nice and shaved, I guess.
You'll look down... We all do it. I remember my uncle chiding me when I was kidding on and on and on. But the millennials and the Gen Zs, I say they're much maligned because of the woke culture that's come about. And we always get the pendulum swing.
For sure.
Is in the midst of that, which annoys a lot of people, there's a lot of good stuff being acted upon. And the main thing is that people of those two generations are asking questions that we never did. So they are asking food providers and food companies, where did you grow this? How did you grow it? Did you spray chemicals on it? Did those chemicals have a negative effect on the environment? Is it being watered into the streams that's going into the rivers? Is it killing off fish life, aquatic life? Is it having an effect on the climate? There's a big concern, quite rightly, amongst the younger generation that this is going to hit about climate disruption. I'm not going to get into the politics of whether it's man-made or it's not man-made. All we know at the moment is things are heating up in certain areas, and in other areas it's getting wetter or drier. There's climate disruption happening. I don't call it global warming. And the impact behind that is driven by a number of factors, one of which, about 30% of that is being driven by agriculture because of the conventional way that we farm. So moving to a regenerative way of farming is also going to have a massively positive impact on climate. Because what I said at the start, when the plant photosynthesizes, it draws carbon out of the atmosphere. So we've got hundreds of billions of our tax dollars being spent by the government, bless their hearts at the moment, on these carbon capture, technical whiz things. 90% of which will go down the toilet, flush down the toilet. But they've got a lot of lobbying power and a lot of lobbying money. My governor, as I call Greg, came up with the term Occam's razor. Have you ever heard of Occam's razor?
No.
Occam's razor, again, look it up, guys and girls. The simplest solution is often the best. So rather than trying to overthink this with all our wonderful technology, and we've got AI and AIG or GAA, I get mixed up, coming down the pipe, which I'm not knocking, by the way, and I'll say this before I go into talking about Occam's razor. We are a regenerative farm, but we also embrace precision agriculture. So we will have in-field sensors. We're going to have AI robots doing our picking. We're going to look at autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles and the whole 9 yards to balance that off. We're not anti-technology at all. You have to have a balance of both. Occam's razor, simplest solutions offer the best solution. If we moved the dial and converted, some people say 20%, let's call it 40%, let's be conservative.
Yeah.
If 40% of the world's agriculture converted from conventional to regenerative, we would not have a climate challenge at all. The carbon in the atmosphere that is all the big issue, carbon and the methane and the nitrogen would be sucked out and be put into the ground.
Yeah.
Now, again, there's a lot of debate about how you measure that or how effective it is. Is it carbon cycling? As in it's coming, it captures it and then it releases it back again? Or is it what they call sequestration? That's a whole different conversation for another time. The key to it is that that's what conventional farming releases into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And again, whether it's livestock, there's a lot of methane being released. With regenerative agriculture, it's captured. So there's a solution there. So this is a multifunctional, multi-benefit
really is,
paradigm shift that we really need to look at and then take action on.
Yeah.
And as you said, there's pioneers like Gabe. I'll use people like John Kemp. I'll use people like Dr. Elaine Ingham and Todd Harrington and myriad others who've been doing this, have been actively doing it and then teaching, training, educating on it for 15 years and now are growing an increasingly growing number of individuals, whether they're consumers or interested individuals or farmers who are now being attracted into this and exploring it. And that, I'll say this before we finish on that side as well. This is the other wonderful thing. Greg now has moved from wanting to, we did an interview in the Indie recently, the local local newspaper for the Triangle. Within that newspaper article, Greg was stated as saying, I used to think that my legacy for my life's work was going to be my VC work, of which he is, as I said, one of the most successful, and in his field, the most successful in the country. Phenomenal. He said, and he looked the reporter in the eye, he said, it's no longer that, it's this farm. And more importantly, it's the regenerative farming movement. He's gone from somebody like myself, 5 years ago, he didn't even know regenerative agriculture exists, and he's now an evangelist for it. He can see the profit.
It's amazing.
He can see the upside of the profit and all the benefits from a farming perspective, but more and more, he and I and the team ourselves have woken up to the responsibility we have now that we know this, now that we're seeing it in action, now that we're interacting and collaborating with these people to get the word out. So I want to say this to you today, Jeb. To you today, Jeb, thank you for bringing me in on this.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, for
this
sure.
isn't about me having an opportunity to wax lyrical on all my interesting tales and stories. Trust me, some of them were. It's about getting the message, even if this only reaches one person, and that one person makes a different, more engaged, more consciously aware purchasing decision, and then passes that on.
Yeah, I think
Mighty
it will.
oaks from little acorns do grow. We each got to do our bit on the back of it. And the other thing I will say on this as well, Greg's also putting his money where his mouth and his passion now is, not just behind the farm, but behind something we're building called the Centre for Regenerative Agriculture.
Amazing,
so we're blessed having on that site that we took over from a family called the Nutters, who made a commitment to keeping. Bob Nutter was the father who built the farms in 1963. Roger Nutter is his son who took the farm on and then sold it to Greg 3 years ago, but still is an integral part and partner on the farm. The Nutters made a commitment to keeping that as agricultural land, and he could have got way more than agricultural prices. So he deserves as much credit as anybody and his father before him. But the other thing is they built an agricultural centre as an education to school children, because most kids don't have a clue where the food comes from. It comes from the supermarket, or God forbid, a gas station, in a cellophane wrapper, in a styrofoam, or in a box. Is that when he found that out, he was shocked, and he built this amazing, sizable building for doing presentations and engagement with school children. Beautiful. And Greg's now taken that on with a partner, a local partner from Honeysuckle. Used to be the Honeysuckle Tea Rooms. And what we're doing now is converting that into an educational, inspirational training centre, not just for Chapel Hill, not just for the Triangle, not just for the county or the state, but for the whole of the East Coast. And we have now got these connections with all these movers and groovers and leading lights in the regenerative movement that we are collaborating with a view to bringing their offerings here so we can reach out and touch local farmers first and then all up and down the East Coast. We want to be an instigator and a catalyst for this regenerative movement. The person who is most responsible for creating that is a lady who is also Greg's partner, Meredith Sabier, who had the idea after we visited. It was actually BASF, Bayer Crop Science in the Triangle, and they'd built a sustainable agricultural centre. And on the way back, she had an intuitive spider thought about why don't we create a regenerative agricultural centre?
Wow.
And that is being formulated as we speak. So there's a lot of things going to be happening.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Martin, it's inspiring, man. I really appreciate you coming in and sharing all about it. I hope, like you said, I hope these conversations can help open people's eyes and ears to the exciting future and they can vote with their dollars. So thanks for being like a light and being a wealth of information. This is so fun.
Yeah.
We'll have to do it again.
Absolute pleasure. And as I have now found out that you target the millennials and the Gen Zs, that's who I'll be going after when we get some fruit coming to the market. So I might be asking you to come in and work some of your marketing skills with us.
We'll have to come and check it out. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thanks,
Absolute
everybody.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.